with the June 17th meeting of the Node.js modules team. We do not, unfortunately, have a large group here today, so we are going to wing it and just kind of have a discussion. We may not even use the full time, but we started a cool discussion while we were waiting for people to join and figured probably better to just kick it off. So the things that we had on the agenda for today included special treatment for package JSON resolution and exports is one issue. Module CJS exports detection is a second one. Those were both from Node.js Node. In modules, we had API for package dir and rediscussion of out of order CJS exec and chartering of the modules team. So I'm going to open up the meeting doc really quickly and just drop that in the chat if people could add their names. It looks like someone already started helping with this, which is lovely, although we do have to make sure it is valid markdown, which I'm fixing very quickly. And I've got those Cherry MX Blues, which you can hear super clickety-clackety. Cool. And so the discussion that we were just having was related to package JSON, and specifically how package JSON interacts with the current support for package exports. So if you're watching this and you're not familiar with it, package exports is a newer feature that we've introduced into Node and has now been backported all the way to Node 12. And it's a way in which you can programmatically define the interface of what modules or deep imports are exported by the package. This affects both CommonJS and ESM. One place where people have been bit a couple times is by not having package.json defined in there. Some folks had the intuition that package.json should be in there by default, and that is one of the discussions that we were having. And so the discussion that we were having before we interrupted for about 6 minutes now to get this stream set up and set context was, do we need to kind of carve out package JSON in the export map, which I know at least myself and some others are not enthusiastic about for a number of reasons, and we can dig into that. Or alternatively, what kind of APIs are missing from core that could help make this a little bit simpler. And so Jordan and I, prior to starting the stream, were kind of discussing this and discussing, more explicitly. What can an API like that look like? What does core currently not have? And so if I am to summarize where we left it, if I recall, Jordan, you were pointing out that someone could use require.resolve or there's import meta resolve, which is behind a flag. But there are ways that you can use that to resolve from a specifier where its entry point is. But you have no way of guaranteeing that that entry point is at the root directory of the module. And I think there is some fuzzy stuff that you would need to do. You could crawl up the file tree from that root until you find a folder that matches the name of the module. But that's the heuristics there are not perfect. There's no reason to know that a module called mod fun doesn't have a folder in it called mod fun, because whoever names a module that probably is not thinking too hard about what they're naming.
Well, and additionally, the presence package JSONs can, so required with the exports field, required.resolve of a specifier with a slash after it can point to a nested directory. That directory can contain a package JSON. That package JSON might even be a CP'd package JSON from the root of the package, so the name field in it might already match. There's a bunch of the number of edge cases as you add heuristics gets smaller, but there exists possibilities where you cannot know for sure where the package directory is, and so it seemed to me like the proposal to add an API that exposes, given this bare identifier, what's the directory that's in, where's Node looking for a package JSON, that provides a polyfillable path for tools. It still needs some heuristics for the few versions of Node that have export support but lack this API. But I feel like that's somewhat acceptable. And but then it also completely avoids any need to force package JSON to be part of the external API of a package. Because then you can fs.read file the package dir plus with path.joined to package JSON if that's what you want, and that's not part of require import.
Yeah, and we don't support importing JSON right now anyways, which
True.
also further complicates it. I mean, there's spec work being done to enable that, but that's just like something to keep in mind.
But if we ever did, we then very much wouldn't want package JSON, I think, to automatically be part of every package's API, you know, or at least some folks wouldn't. And I think this sort of package dir API would allow us to sidestep that whole debate.
Yeah, and I guess this is like one of, I guess one of the things that would be interesting here to figure out would be like a heuristic that I could imagine could work, although like could be a little bit weird, would be like, if you're a package, if we made an ecosystem package and that package was called like, you know, package JSON finder or whatever, right? Like if that were a top level package and you're guaranteed that other packages that you're trying to resolve are also top level packages, you actually have all the information that you need to resolve the package JSON, because you would know that like they are just siblings at the root of node modules.
Except that when you require something, it might not be in that node modules. It could be in a parent's node modules or a parent's node modules, or it could be from the node path directory, or it could be.
But the case where this would matter, and this is like what I'm not 100% in, but the case where this would matter, in my personal opinion, would be, I am a project, I have a dependency, I want that dependency's package JSON. Like it would all, like this is the hierarchy that we're always talking about here. So in that hierarchy, if that hierarchy is guaranteed, any package that I install as a direct dependency will always be a direct peer of any package that I'm trying to get the package JSON of.
Right, but I think most of the use cases are for, I'm a tool and I'm being used in a project that I don't control, and I need to get one of that project's dependencies, and one of the things that project can require. And the answer to that question is not always going to reside in the top level of that package's node module folder. Whereas if it's sort of like, if in other words, if it uses the same logic Node already uses to locate the directory where it looks for a package JSON that has an exports field, then like it matches all the use cases immediately. It's essentially just exposing a subset of the require algorithm and the import algorithm. And yeah, go ahead.
I guess the thing that's tricking my brain, and maybe it just needs to be whiteboarded a little bit, is like if I am so the workflow that you're talking about is like, I'm a dependency. I am like a CLI utility or something. I'm a dependency of a project. And maybe I'm doing something like bundling or building or like whatever. I am being instrumented by the top level package. And then I need to know where all of like the other dependencies are. Like you would need to set the scope of the root either way, don't you? Like of what the root package is, to do this magically.
Well,
because
the root is slash. I can have slash node modules on my computer, and every project on my system can require out of it.
I guess what I mean is like the child, like the dependency will always resolve things relative to itself. So let's say, for example, that the dependency has a dependency that is a semver major difference than the dependency of the root project. I couldn't just use like require thing slash JSON, like the name of the project, to resolve that JSON, because I will get my dependencies version of it, not
if it's overlapping. Yeah, but if it's like, but the way that like node path works is as well, which still exists, is I could specify 73 directories in a specific order, and like writing an algorithm that checks each one of those like is doable, but it's a whole lot of unnecessary work since Node's already got the logic to do that work in its regular require algorithm.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to figure out is like what guarantees we have to start with, and make sure that like we're not making requirements that are not reasonable. Because like to what I was saying is like, if you are the root package and you have a dependency, you need to know what the root package is that you're resolving everything off of, no matter what. And once you know that, you know that root package slash node module slash thing slash package JSON is always the path that you're going from.
Right.
So like,
that last part is not correct though. Like even if you know the root package, I'm saying that you do not know that that package's node modules folder contains the thing you're trying to require. That is not a guarantee you've ever had in Node, and you continue to not have it now. And so there's not like that's the 99.999% common case, of course. But
no,
like,
but I guess what I'm saying, what I'm saying though is even if we give you an API in Node doing what you're asking for, that API will still either need to be given the root that you're resolving from, or alternatively be resolving from the roots of the package that you're running. And so I don't actually see why this is any different than just giving a userland thing the root that you're using as the base of your resolve. Like, I don't know why this needs a custom API in Node to do it.
So what I'm saying is the hard part isn't knowing the root. Like tools already have that with like process.cwd. So that the issue is that there is no way from a specifier in the presence of exports to reliably know where the package JSON that has that exports field lives. It's just not like it's in the common case, it's easy, but there exist cases where it is impossible to know for sure.
And I think what I'm saying is I don't know that that's true. I think I would have to whiteboard it a bit, but I actually think that with package exports, you might have everything that you need to resolve that reliably.
I mean, I can construct, and we can do this offline. I can construct a little package structure that would make it impossible to know for sure without knowing that structure in advance.
That's cool.
But like
my intuition could be wrong here, but
yeah, I mean, like let me put it this way: if you're correct, someone should make that package anyway as a trial for going into Node. And if you're not correct, then it sounds like maybe it should go into Node. Is that reasonable?
Yeah, I guess like the workflow here that I would imagine that would make a ton of sense is like, this sounds like a useful userland package that we should try to hit like the 100% test case of. And if we find edge I cannot work and require APIs in Node, then we should totally explore and do that. I'm just not immediately convinced, but I could be wrong. I'm not immediately convinced that we need a Node specific API for it.
Right. Cool.
Well, yeah,
I'll say if it's possible to 100% do it in userland, we should just do that for now and then wait and see what the demand is like.
And I mean, like, really all we need to do is like show best practices of how to do it. It's not ideal. I think like the flip side of it, if we wanted to find a way to like whitelist package JSON, the thing to me that becomes such a big challenge is like, we now need like some sort of grammar for excludes, which I know is like something that is being discussed right now, of like private versus public is one, but like it's different from like excludes. So it's like, if we made package JSON on by default, what about the cases where people do not want the package JSON to be part of their API that's exposed? So now we need to do like I could think of like an exclamation mark at the beginning of something being, or like
you can already do it. You can say /package.json and /package both map to null or to like, or whatever one we defaulted on, you would just map it to null or false or the empty object. But like, but yeah, the grossness of that is part of the pushback, I think, to have it on by default.
Yeah. And I guess maybe like the big question here would be like, how many use cases are there realistically where we don't want to give people the package JSON?
Right.
And perhaps, oh, hello, Jeffrey, you've joined. Perhaps it is worth kind of stepping back and reevaluating our defaults here and saying like, hey, if we don't really have many use cases or many people who are raising their hands saying we don't want the package, like we want to exclude the package JSON, then perhaps the amount of like tooling and infrastructure and ecosystem stuff that we're saying we'd have to do in education is maybe not worth it. Jeff, to give you a quick update, we're going back and forth on the excluded package JSON, or whether or not it should be, on by default in the exports map, and what kind of tools we might need if it isn't.
Yeah, I remember the discussion from last time. I don't know if we made any progress. I'm still leaning towards at least not doing anything, at least for now, because I kind of want to get a sense of how big a ecosystem problem it is, because it doesn't seem like all tools have this issue. So, is it only a very few number of tools? Is it that big of a deal for them to update? I'm not like a hard no, we should never do anything, but I also
Mhm.
don't feel like it's urgent. I don't know.
Yeah, I also have an intuition, which could be wrong, which is that like people have expectations based on how things have worked in the past, but like give it 6 months, a year, 2 years, those expectations don't really exist anymore because these are new tools. So like what makes more sense from educating and onboarding new folks? Is it, hey, like it's always this except for this one case where it's not, or like export, like you need to include everything in the exports is like a pretty clear story to tell. Anytime you have like caveats is like where, in my personal opinion, things kind of get weird. And albeit we're talking about just like one caveat for something that is like a necessary part of a module, but I think it's worthwhile to consider that people may not want to expose that, especially like if we're doing things like using the export field to generate the import maps. People may not want the package JSON exposed in the import map in a web application. Like that's not necessarily a huge issue, but like I could see that being something that people aren't thrilled about. And I think it would be personally make more sense to teach people that like anything that's not in the exports field is not importable or requirable, period, instead of everything but.
Right. And it's a totally fair point that the caveat of like, if we make it implicit, then all the tools have to explicitly exclude it. And so there's tooling work either way. So my preference remains having the package.dir API being in Node, and then no packages have to ever add package JSON unless they have some weird reason why they want to. And I'd be able to remove it from all my packages, right? Like it's only in there
So
for this reason.
Jordan, you probably know the answer to this. So that like test script that I was writing on to inspect the CommonJS named exports, I've been a little busy lately, as you guys might have heard. But the next step I was going to make on it was to try to do some kind of naive analysis of the README files of all these damn packages to try to see, well, do they mention import syntax or require syntax and so on. And try to see like, okay, well, if they mention import syntax, are they using named exports, et cetera? And then of those packages, how many do this or that, et cetera. Anyway, so I need some way to like programmatically find all the README files for 1,000 packages. And so it was like, oh, it's the same problem of finding the package JSON. So it's sort of like, I haven't started writing the code yet, but I was thinking like, oh, I could do like require.resolve package name, but that doesn't get me the root of the package. It just gets me like whatever the main is. And then I guess I could like work my way up the path to find the node modules folder, or the first path that says node modules, then go down from there to find the package. Is that like the best we could do? Like there's no like shortcut to kind of doing the legwork myself of navigating the tree.
You could, I mean, since you're testing things that are on NPM, when you install it, you could open up their package JSON and delete their exports field and then require.resolve. But that's like, that's a chicken and the egg thing for an arbitrary package. So it's, but that's the whole issue, is there's no reliable way to do it. I think for readme.md, you're better off because those are unlikely to be duplicated, whereas package JSONs with type module are bound to be littered throughout the tree. So like for finding the root directory, maybe you could use the README as a placeholder, but like there's packages without READMEs. There's,
well, I mean, for my purposes, I would just exclude ones that I couldn't find a README for. But like, this does come back to like the thing we were talking about of like, should there be maybe like a helper method that's like get package root? So like, I feel like that maybe there shouldn't be too much debate about adding. So it'd be the same as resolve, except instead of resolving to the main, it just resolves to like the folder that the root level package of JSON would be in.
So it'd be like
module
module.get package root, and you give it a specifier and it gives you back the root of the package.
Yes. And it would, and the specifier, would be whatever, it would be a bare specifier, and it would give you the same value that appending a slash on the end of it would have given you pre exports.
And then these tools that are looking for slash package JSON could always use this, like get package root, package name plus slash package JSON.
Right.
you know, in a fs.read file.
Right. And there would
call, and then it's-
there would have to be a userland module for this, regardless of whether that was before or after it landed in Node. Like there would be a userland module, and that would serve as the polyfill. So all the tools could migrate to use that for almost all versions of Node, and then like now there's
Yeah.
no longer any question about the consumable API of a package versus the location on disk of a package.
Well, Jordan, this feels like it's your wheelhouse with Resolve. You want to write the userland module?
If I'm happy to do that, I mean, I have to do it for Resolve anyway. So
Yeah, I guess like the two thoughts I have about this is like, Jeff, I'm I'm not 100% about this, but I think the like basic naive algorithm that you were suggesting, whereby you like resolve the file for the entry point, and then from that entry point, crawl up until you see node modules, then crawl down one directory, and then append package JSON. I'm pretty sure that that will work 100% of the time. Like, especially if you can serve it like a secondary, like if there's a second variable that's optional for like what the root is that you're requiring from, like I'm pretty sure that that would work every time.
The specific reason it won't is that people often use Babel with the copy files option, which includes copying the package JSON into the output folder, which means dist/package.json will be an identical copy of root package JSON for that package, which means that you can't check the name field or the exports field. There's no indication that it's not the root package in the disk folder.
Well, you wouldn't be looking for the package JSON. You would be looking for
Node modules.
Node_modules as a path string. And then you go down one level from that, look at the folder name, and then package it JSON.
I feel like that'd be tricky with symlinks and also with node path and also with
I'm sure there are edge cases where this wouldn't work, but
I'm pretty sure there wouldn't be, because like the internal API that you're talking about here, Jordan, would be essentially doing something similar, but not exactly to this. Like we would be resolving, you would have to do like a resolve of like the package itself to get like the root folder. Now we have like internal APIs that do that, but like if you use require.resolve, for example, or if we made module.resolve, as we were talking about, because we weren't sure if we wanted import meta resolve, but if we had module.resolve, and module.resolve gave you like the path to the thing that the specifier resolved to, and also had a secondary option to like change what the root of that resolve is, you could always reliably go up to the node modules folder that's above it, go back down one to the root, and the package JSON there would like that would reliably always work.
So it just, as you're talking, it's sort of, I think you're right in that it is 100% possible. Essentially what it would require though is actually like so for example, resolve already needs to duplicate the entire exports, node resolve algorithm. Once it does that, I could expose a subset of it from resolve as a get packaged or API, which would work 100% of the time. So I think you're right, and I was wrong, that it is actually 100% possible, but I think it does require re-implementing the entirety of Node's resolution algorithm.
No, because can't you just like, I mean, two things that you could do depending on like the direction you want to do it is you could either use like import meta URL and create require and then use the require resolve from that, or you can just use import meta resolve, require resolve, or we could make a module resolve. Like I'm saying,
right,
like if we expose resolve,
yeah, that
gives you everything you need to do this.
I'm not sure it does, because there's not even guaranteed to be a node modules folder anywhere. It is possible with node alone, without patching require, to not have any file system at all, and not have node modules on disk, and just use a node path to have no node modules folders anywhere, but have a folder full of node modules, and so any crawling up and down just wouldn't work. So the problem is the resolve algorithm is like 10 steps and you need 8 of them.
I want to see that in practice. My understanding is that if you set like the node path to include other folders, so what you're saying is if you have a node path and that path is like, an arbitrary path on your disk, it looks in there for the folders, and there won't necessarily
treats that folder as a node modules folder. It does not look in it for a node modules folder.
So then couldn't your algorithm be like, search up the path until you find node underscore modules, or like the path from the root to this segment is in the node path environment variable? That would be how you'd handle that case, right?
Yeah, you'd want to do like an includes. You could do like if we treated the node path as a array and then did includes of the path as you strip apart each one and crawl up. So like that would probably work and be more verbose. But I think we're maybe getting a little too in the weeds.
So I think there's a number of angles of attack, and they're all worth exploring. But I still am. I think that the reality is that even if it ends up being with all of these methods doable in userland correctly, it still seems kind of silly to not put it in Node, since that work is already done in Node. It's literally just like taking the require algorithm, taking a subset of it, putting that in another API and sharing it. Like
that work, meaning the helper method, you mean?
Meaning the like
the
Node
like get
already
package
has to,
root method that we were talking about.
Exactly. Yes, I'm saying Node already has all the logic implemented for a long time to find the package root, because that's where it looks up the package JSON.
I think that we'd have to go through and look at how the algorithm's implemented and where it's implemented, because I mean, it may require refactoring, but it may not be as straightforward as you might think. That's worth digging into. Like, I don't think that I would object to it. I know that upstream there's like a high bar for adding new APIs, so like this is at least something that we should consider. I think, but I could be wrong, that like what we're identifying here as a gap either way though is like there is not something like resolve available in the ESM goal other than using import meta resolve, which is currently behind a flag. And like we were talking about trying to like coordinate with Whatwig before landing that. So what we may want to push for is some sort of resolve-like API or suite of resolve-like APIs that live on either util or module. And I think perhaps like a meta issue discussing this and then suggesting like what APIs we could add might be a good place to start. I think module.resolve at the very least, that takes you know, a file URL or a like or process.cwd or like something as a default for how it handles that resolve would be a place to start. And then like I think what you're asking for is something that's more akin to like resolve root or like resolve module root, which may or may not be an API that we would think would be useful and worthwhile including. But like, I think maybe we should bring all of those up at once as like a series of APIs we're interested in introducing to either util or module.
There's also that one that I proposed like a year ago, which was like get type or get package type or something like that, where it's like for this file on disk or this URL of a file, will Node interpret this file as CommonJS or as ESM? As in, like, if it's a .js file, like, is it in a ESM package scope or not, essentially?
A slight tweak on that is something I've already needed and sort of built is, will this specifier, is this specifier importable and or requirable? Because it could be both or just one.
Yeah.
So it may make sense. And possibly, and Jordan, I know you're going to love this, maybe there is a top level resolve module that we want to introduce.
All right.
Well, more so in that, like, if there's a series of different APIs that we're talking about here.
Well, we'd also have to figure out, like, do all these APIs apply to both CommonJS and ESM? And if they only apply to one and not the other, yeah, do they live under the same top level thing and so on? But yeah.
Right.
And I feel like my gut on this would be we don't need a new API for it. We could probably put all this within module. And I think that the ones that we pick should be ones that work for both goals. But I think that perhaps an issue to discuss, like resolve type, right? Like, or resolve types, or resolve root, resolve path. I don't know. There's like a whole bunch of different ones that we may want to do. And the thing that I guess gets pretty interesting here too, when we start thinking about this, if it's a standalone API called resolve, well, like if we're resolving with require versus resolving with import, we may actually get different results if there's conditional exports. So how do we think about that from the API perspective? In which case, Jordan, to your point, something like resolve root actually may be a better API than resolve.
Yeah.
Because it will always be the same no matter which environment you're working with.
Right. And then from there, you can apply whatever module system logic you want, or you can read fs read file, whatever file. Like, yeah, I think it's all these things are worth exploring. Most of these things are good, and I think we should have them. I think that in particular, I remain convinced that we should have a first class get module root or get package root or whatever API somewhere. And if that were to exist, then any question about implicit package JSON, I think, would wither away. Yeah, and something here that also could be useful as another like thought is like module dot like get metadata, for example, could actually just give you the package JSON.
We talked about that one. We called it get package metadata in the description, and the point of that was like, if for whatever reason it's not actually a package JSON on disk, but like the package is being loaded through some kind of caching or in memory or shenanigans, an HTTPS loader, etc., then this would provide some other way of getting the data that would be in package JSON, but would not necessarily be where you'd expect to find it, in other words.
Yeah.
So
because thinking about something that's like global or like useful for both CommonJS and ESM, like the one thing I could imagine would be like a resolve, but the resolve actually gives you back like an object with all the entry points for the file that you've suggested. But like realistically, what's more useful than that may actually just be the whole export map, right? And we don't need to actually go through the whole resolution algorithm to do that. In fact, like if you just like get package metadata, and it gives you like a path to the root, it gives you the exports, it gives you maybe like a handful of things, or maybe it gives you the entire package.json. I'm not sure like what would be the best balance here.
I think we'd need the entire one. But yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it depends on what we want to do, right? Because like if all that we're trying to do is give you information that we can, like resolve, for example, without having to do any stats or file system reads, like it would be a faster API. So like if we can give you, for example, from the module, like what is its root directory and like what is the path to its package JSON or something like that. Like, I don't know. I think that could help it with it being like an asynchronous or a synchronous API rather than an asynchronous API.
Well, yeah, because all these package JSONs are already cached by Node. So a get package metadata call could just return whatever Node has cached for these, for all of these packages without the module needing to do lookups.
They're only cached after the module has been loaded though, right?
Oh, well, it could return it if it's cached and then look it up if not, or something.
And cache it if it's when it finds it, if it's not.
Yeah.
And that'll make the future module loading faster anyway.
But now that starts to raise the question of like, should this be a sync API or an async API? If it's an async API, then it has major usability issues, right? So, yeah.
The other thing I'm thinking is like the exports and conditional exports are so complicated that like, sure, a package like resolve could duplicate all that logic for user land, because I'm thinking what needs to be able to replicate that logic besides Node? It's going to be bundlers, right? Like something like Rollup or Webpack that wants to, like, you want to be able to give it like, okay, bundle a thing that's either under the import condition or the module condition or whatever, the browser condition, and then it like knows how to deal with conditional exports. And yeah, someone could write a userland module like resolve that then all these bundlers will depend on, but I almost wonder if it's better to be part of Node, because then it's like for sure going to be correct and like can update over time, and the bundlers will update with it. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess the intuition that I have that's going to be like something we need to like debate and figure out is like, what is the core functionality that we need to do this in a reproducible and reliable way? I think that like, especially when we talk about like maintenance, ability to iterate on the API, ability to make breaking changes, ability to extend it, like there is actually a fairly large cost to putting this in Node from a maintenance standpoint in like in a negative direction. It makes things much less flexible. It makes it much harder to iterate on the API. So I really do think like as we start talking through the complexity of this, as we start talking through like, should this be a synchronous API or an async API, or like what kind of workflow should we have here? Or like stuff like, can we hook this into the internal caches, right? Like something like, can we use the internal cache to improve performance? Sounds good, but like how much does that really improve performance is something that would be worth looking into. But as far as like when we're thinking about designing this API, I think we'll have a lot more flexibility to cover lots of different edge cases and offer a better user experience if it is not in core. If it is in core, we're going to have like the most kind of minimal API possible. So I think part of this exercise that might be useful to the point you were saying, Jeff, there is like to talk to different bundlers and see like, where are your limitations right now? What are the things that you're trying to do that are hard? And start thinking about like, what are the minimal number of like resolved base APIs that we need to make for individuals to like cover the baseline of what they all need. If we start making things in Node that have too much of an opinionated API, we can start making something that's like absolutely useless to all these people. And now we have this like complex API that we need to maintain that, you know, the people we made it for don't even use.
Yeah, the other big use case would be loaders. Like I already had that thing about like that's what get package type was for, would be like I want to know how Node would load a JS file at a particular path so that my CoffeeScript loader can know whether to treat a .coffee file there as CSM or .js. You know, that's going to be there are going to be lots of loaders that need that type of thing. And so far we've like gotten away without needing extra methods by kind of repurposing the hooks, the node hooks themselves as those methods, but it's a little hacky. So, but anyway, that's the other like broad area where this kind of stuff would come up.
Yeah. I still think that give me the package dir is the simplest. It's like the least opinionated API and enables the most use cases. But we can, like you said, we should keep looking into it and making sure that we are meeting the use cases.
Yeah, and I actually think the one that maybe the most interesting to explore here would be the package dir is like very specific. It doesn't require a lot of work, but it is like very specific to like what you're resolving there, with different from like specific metadata. Yeah, I think that.
But it sidesteps having to make a decision about what metadata is exposed and not, because it's just like, here's a folder, whatever's in there, go nuts. Right?
Yes, it's just like resolve root.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll think on that, and then like I think we already have some issues, so maybe we can kick it back there. Looking at some other things that we had on the agenda today, I think there's a couple things in here that are being flagged for the agenda that I think maybe we could drop for now, specifically rediscussion of out of order CJS exec. That issue has not had a comment on it since May. Does anyone have any concerns with dropping that from the agenda?
We can drop that one, but I think it's the conversation has shifted to that other PR that Guy worked on with the CommonJS named exports detection, which I think is definitely still in flux or in development. Gus is the main objector there, and I don't think he's on today, so maybe it's not worth talking about that one today. But
I have concerns with it too, especially with the numbers that we were seeing about like how successful the heuristics were. If I recall correctly, the heuristics were not very successful, but perhaps I am remembering wrong.
I think it's more of like, how do you define success? And that's what people were starting to get at the end, is like, you kind of almost have to look at a bunch of cases, because it's like the things that weren't detected often aren't intended to be exported.
Yeah, like they only they only exported a default, so it's like
or they only intend to be exported. Like Lodash only intends to export a default.
Yeah.
You know,
and the fact that you can destructure it in CommonJS is because you are literally destructuring that export, not because they are all unique named exports.
Yeah. So that's why I wanted to do the further research about the READMEs, was because sort of it's like I don't know what the right answer there is. It's like just because you can destructure it, is that the user expectation that then this should therefore be a named export, or should we be more treating each package as README as the source of truth and be like, well, if the README doesn't tell you to expect destructuring and or named exports, then that's not supposed to be part of the expected API.
Yeah,
I kind of wanted to just at least do some research first, and then we could have that discussion.
Yeah, and I think where my gut is going here is somewhat similar to Gus, and it's like the level of ambiguity here actually makes me quite uncomfortable, and like a clear line where like we just don't support this, and here's like an error that tells you like we made much better errors now that actually tells you what code to use instead, or write a wrapper. I don't know. I keep flip-flopping because also writing the wrapper is a huge pain in the butt. But maybe there's also like an opt-in that we could do in the package JSON to turn this feature on, so that maybe there's a field in the package JSON that could turn on this like smart grepping.
Oh, the heuristic.
Yeah. So if basically the idea here being this would be simpler and less work than writing a wrapper in every package, but would be opt-in, so we would know every time that we run the heuristic that it is the intent of the module author for it to be run.
I mean, that's similar to the other proposal I had from a long way back, where it was like, just let the people define the named exports in package JSON for CommonJS, because we're parsing that anyway.
But it removes from it the biggest problem that I saw with it, which was it causes package JSONs to grow exponentially, right? Like, so this would be like an order one single bit that gets flipped in the package JSON.
Well, I mean, that's true, but the main objection people had that I remember to that earlier proposal was just, well, if someone's gonna update the package at all, they could just add a wrapper. Like, why are we providing other alternatives to kind of the quote unquote correct way of doing this?
Yeah, and I think the reason for it here would be that like writing the wrapper has proven to be a pain in the ass, has proven to be like a slow process, is not by any means like foolproof, and it's hard to test at times. So I guess if we have this ability of doing the heuristics and it's performant and it's not like a ton of terrible code to maintain, and the major complaint that we have is that it's ambiguous, like I feel like this is splitting the difference, whereby it's saying, okay, like we have this smart way that we as a platform can offer this to people, but we're going to make it like an opt-in instead of.
I think we kind of need to, I almost feel like we need to get it as good as we can with Guy's branch and maybe merge it in behind a flag to try to get some user feedback, because like it's really all about what are user expectations here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, users have to look up documentation anyway just to know what the names are that they're trying to import. So it's sort of like, and it would
not
fail
if they import star as.
Well, wouldn't that work though for all CommonJS? That's the default import, isn't it?
But currently import star as will just say, oh, there's just a default. But if you enabled this flag, then there would be a bunch of other stuff on there. And I think a lot of people don't read READMEs and just explore things in test programs and REPLs.
But you can't even use static import in a REPL. So
no, but you can use dynamic import, which gives you the same result. For a non-bendable module.
What I was saying is like, I think we need to. It's not like it's a. it's not like it's an ambiguous thing where sometimes it's not like it's indeterministic where sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Like if it works for a particular package, it will work for that package at least, you know, until that package has a major upgrade. So if someone writes an import statement against a package for which it works, they'll either work or fail right off the bat the moment they first try to import the package, and then they'll write their code one way or the other and probably never update it. And that's probably fine for people. That's kind of like the same as if they had picked a particular named export to bring in and they're assuming that named export's not going to change, you know, short of some major change of that package, you know?
I mean, I guess the concerns I have there, first of all, is that the packages people really are going to want to do this on are packages that aren't going to get updates. And second is that starting to use Babel is already a Semver major change unless you're super careful. And as is starting to use exports. And I am mildly concerned that the heuristic will be more likely to break because of a Babel change. And like,
you mean like Babel change, meaning some package is using Babel to transpile itself and some update to Babel changes what
the
Babel
transpiler output,
outputs?
which alters the heuristic. Either it gets more exports or less exports, but it's either less would be the breaking change. But yeah, or the name, you know, like the name of them is mangled or something. I don't know. Like it just depends on what the heuristic is, right? And I think it's possible to write something that's not brittle in that way, but that would likely
feeling that
miss a lot of cases.
I mean, that heuristic hasn't changed in several years, I think, and B, I think Babel would be very hesitant to change it because they know that there are all these other bundlers and other tools relying on it already.
Sure, Babel and TypeScript and other transpilers.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so you're right. I think the risk of that is low, but it's just kind of, I don't know. I think that in general, if it's going to require, like to Miles's point, I think, or to Miles's suggestion, I think if it's going to require action on the part of the author, the wrapper is actually not that difficult. And like,
right. Well, that's the status quo. I think that the idea is we're kind of not worrying about that case because if the author's going to update it, then great, then there's no problem. We're worrying about the case of all of the old packages that may never get updated. I think I really think it's a real open question that we should try to get real user feedback on. It'd be like, is it better for half or 2/3 or whatever we ultimately get to for those to have named exports that are kind of magically detected and the other ones don't, and you have no idea before you try it which packages are going to work or which ones aren't? Or is it better to just know that they're all default is all you're going to get and it's always going to work? Although that's always going to be the case even if we have this detection thing built into Node. So I just don't know. I feel like we need to kind of survey users to know the answer to that. What do you think, Miles?
I think doing some sort of user research study is not a bad idea. Bye, Darcy.
See ya.
I think that the problem that we may run into here is like biased responses, because like, do you want named exports for Common.js is going to like definitely be a yes no matter what. But the subtlety here is like, would you want it if it works X% of the time? Now it starts maybe getting different answers. Or like the other thing from like a module author's perspective, you know, like, and I guess this is another thing, is how it would be interesting to see like what percentage of modules are like using a pattern where like what they're doing. I mean, like most Common.js modules arguably are exporting a default, independent of whether or not we can.
That's what I was gonna say. It's like when I started looking into this, it's pretty uncommon. Like Lodash is like one of the few where it's like you'd commonly destructure off of it, you know, or you'd expect a named export. Okay, maybe that's it. I mean, I'm not saying Lodash is the only one, but like the certainly the majority, maybe 2/3, you know, there only is expected to be one export, like Express or something like that.
I have a pattern I use in most of my projects where I do like module exports equals object and then like all the different things that I'm exporting in that object. But like, albeit when I think about that, it's like, yeah, you can like destructure what's coming out of it, but like from an actual like thinking about how it works standpoint, like this is a default. And like what we're
Mhm.
talking about wanting to do is like destructure the default, not named exports. And so unfortunately, like ESM syntax doesn't really allow for that, right? And like, and
Well,
Or more to the point, bundlers have made it seem like they're interchangeable when they're not.
right.
yeah,
I mean,
and
the pattern I use in all of my like shims, for example, is that the default export is a function, right? However, that function has a bunch of properties on it that are conceptually named exports. And in the packages I've updated, I've written a wrapper that makes those as named exports and the function as a default. So my intention there is that there is a default and there are named exports, but like it's not an object full of, it's not just named exports. It's also not, you know, I'm not doing exports dot whatever equals, right? It's like, I think, I don't know, it's a really tricky question because the intention is also not like, if for all those packages, the intention isn't in the README, right? Like,
Well, it sometimes
It's just
is. Like
there.
I'm thinking of a package
yeah,
like
for all mine, I'm saying for like my 100 packages that do
well,
this.
I'm thinking of like
As
a
a-
package like
as a quick
AWS
heads up,
SDK with
Oh yeah, it's one.
S3. Oh.
we're at time, y'all. And sorry to put down the hammer, but I think we got to stick to it. And I don't feel like we're gonna resolve these these
Anyway, I
export
think
problems.
it's worth at least continuing to study Guy's PR. You know, we may or may not release it under a flag, but I think
I think
there's
the
potential
idea
there.
of pushing to like release this feature under a flag, an experimental flag, so that people can play with it, is definitely worth exploring. I think the main thing that we'd want to figure out with putting it behind a flag would be like this feature, if I recall correctly, is potentially putting like Acorn in the like hot path of starting up Node now, which it wasn't before. I could be mistaken with that, but I believe
No,
it's
pulling in some WASM library for
oh
parsing.
yeah, I forgot. Guy wrote like some crazy super fast.
So there's that. Like, do we really want to pull in this big dependency?
So I
But
think the thing that
yeah.
we need to figure out if we want to land it as a flag is like, can we land it as a flag in a way where it's completely non-observable when the flag is off? And that would be the number one like requirement that I would have. And I think that if we can keep it to being completely unobservable when the flag is off, then we should just land it behind a flag and like have people experiment with it and play with it and tell us if it's something they
Do you
would
want
like to see.
I think Guy is gonna say that is possible, but do you want to maybe put a comment on the PR asking him that, and then that could be,
Yeah.
one of his to-dos?
Yeah, I can add that because I think if we're able to make it completely non-observable when the flag is off, then like we should just land it and see how people use it and how they like it. Unless we have people saying we absolutely never would ever for any reason use this,
Well, or the flip side could be like all the people that are currently complaining to us that like named exports don't work, as in they don't work like they're used to with transpilers. If they're still complaining that they don't work under this flag, then it's like, okay, so we're missing the mark on user expectations. Like if we're never gonna be able to give them what they're expecting, then we might as well, go back to the status quo where it's default only and we have a good error message or something like that.
Yeah, I think
quick check. Do we have many people complaining?
No, just a handful of issues. But, well, I think if you maybe look at the PR that Guy opened, I think he linked to like a bunch of like tweets and stuff. But like, it's definitely a pain point. Like it's something that people on Twitter have pointed out is like, this is a really big missing feature from like Node's ESM implementation that named exports from CommonJS don't work.
so. A thought process that I have here that may even be sufficient as well is like we have the experimental specifier resolution flag, which we may or may not remove at some point, but it's there and it's not being like, it's there. So if you want to like load something and you want to import stuff, it feels like in a way, this being behind a flag that's unobservable if off, combined with the experimental resolution flag, that if someone wants to just use Node as if it's Babel, well, just put these two flags on in your project, and now you should just be able to work in the 99% case, right? So when we think about like ecosystem transition, there's possibly even just like a lot of value in having this behind a flag as kind of just an escape hatch for folks who don't have time to rewrite everything, who don't have time to figure out each of their dependencies. So like if they want to, you know, they can turn this on for now as they're in the process of converting their repos over and have a goal of removing these flags in the future.
Well, but the flip side is that you could do either of these things in loaders, but arguably loaders could do all sorts of shit that we would never merge into Node proper. Like it could actually do what Babel's doing. It could actually transpile. You know, it could do JDD's ESM thing, and so then they like really get that perfect user experience that they're expecting.
But is it going to have the same performance?
I don't think users would care. I mean, they're already like transpiling at runtime. So if they're concerned about performance, then they would, you know, bundle ahead of time.
That's a fair point. And I mean, like that could always be a reason to like have these things behind flags for now. And when loaders land, we could have them as like built-in loaders, for example.
Yeah. Or if we ever find a node namespace and npm, just release a bunch of node official loaders or something. Yeah.
Okay, we're over by almost 10 minutes. I'm calling it. Y'all are great.
Thank you guys.
Thanks for tuning in, anyone who was watching on YouTube. We're going to end the stream.